All right, good morning. It's May the 8th, 2006. This is our your daily Indigenous Emergency Management Situational Briefing, where we provide um, information and news you can use in maintaining awareness of what's going on around your community in the preparation and readiness for wildfires, floods, any kind of emergency that may happen in your community or within your territory or province. And before we dive into things, I just wanted to highlight that we've received some excellent news about sponsorship, which is allowing us to maintain this TikTok live and the training that we do on our Patreon and through our YouTube channels. And we're lucky enough to be partnering with All About Abatement. They are First Nations owned hazardous materials services organization, and they will be sponsoring us to continue this work as we move along. They specialize in hazardous materials like asbestos, lead. What else do they do? Drawing a blank for a second because I didn't write out my notes yet because we just signed them the other day. But yeah, asbestos, lead, hazardous materials. And then we've also partnered with Premier Flood and Fire, who's a restoration company. And they also specialize on reserve restoration and disaster restoration services for other facilities like schools, band offices. They do homes as well. And as we go along in our lives, I will be kind of featuring them and bringing, their sort of work in awareness to this community. Um, I think it's important that we partner with, First Nations owned company like All About Abatement. I've worked both with All About Abatement and Premier Fire and Flood. So they are going to be big components of our community, and they're going to make sure that this community is sponsored in terms of making sure that we keep our costs low, we keep the training like this and our situational briefings kind of coming to you live and sustainable. So to bring them on board and start to learn from them and bring some of that education towards on reserve and off reserve Indigenous peoples, because we're getting to that point in the country where wildfires are going to be significant over the next 4 years. Contaminated levels going to be increasing, I think, for many, many years, for decades, especially on reserve, about how to better manage. So we're going to be, thank you to All About Abatement and to Premier Fire and Flood. We'll continue to kind of up our commentary on what they provide. But overall, if you do need a copy of our situation report, it is available every day on our app at app.hazards. It is Indigenous centric, meaning we pull news, data, information from Indigenous based sources. We do like media, things like that. But today, not a whole lot in the news cycle that's new from previous days. If you go back to our briefings from this past week, you'll see Red Earth Creek Nation flooding. They've started an evacuation. Carrot River near Smoky Burn has broken all records with water levels, almost 3 meters higher than they were last Wednesday. But today it's kind of the same going forward. Those communities are still being impacted. We'll go through the flooding maps. We'll go through the fire maps. And we're going to get into some of the active emergencies. But to start off today, this is today's fire danger map. So a little bit of a change from yesterday. You can see just over 24 hours, the fire danger in southern Alberta. The fire danger in southern Alberta decreased slightly, but it's kind of moving east into Saskatchewan. So there's just sort of in between Alberta and Saskatchewan, those grasslands where it's very, very dry. You're just starting to see things, especially in Saskatchewan, start to creep in and escalate, and they're kind of catching up to where Alberta is. Same with Manitoba. If you look even, at the start of the week, right? Take a look at Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and where they're sitting today. A little bit of a shift. That southern dryness is starting to shift east, creep up into the north. BC is basically mostly engulfed in between like a low to a extreme fire weather danger. And that's going to continue as we start to get into this warmer weather that we're going to see kind of shift east. So if we're looking at where the weather flows, I'll bring up the heat map for temperatures this week. Morning, Samantha. Thanks for joining. Again, if you've missed if you missed these briefings, these are being recorded, and you can get them on our homepage and YouTube. So as we progress into the weekend, we'll take a look at the temperatures. There we go. So by Saturday afternoon into Sunday, you can see this is where we're at right now. You can kind of see that cold kind of pressure area around Hudson's Bay, northern Manitoba. It's starting to move north, and then by Sunday afternoon, basically the prairies are back into kind of those, mid to low teens. And then by Monday, as per the forecast, you can see Alberta mainly going to be hitting in those low 20s, with Manitoba in the mid teens. So that's going to mean that as we progress through the weekend, this fire danger is going to increase across much of the prairies. Now, if we look over in Ontario, there is that big blank spot. That's because they are still affected by some of the precipitation and the flooding that's happened there in the last week. If we take a look at the flood hubs, or the Google Flood Hub, you can kind of see it is starting to level out a little bit, but really sort of in this north central eastern Alberta, we are experiencing some flooding. And I must have really slow internet today because these are really loading a little bit too slow. But yeah, Janvier, what are they looking like here? Let's see. They're still expected to rise through, into the weekend. They're just starting to peak at their extreme flood levels. It's only going to continue to get higher over the next 4 days. And so that part of Alberta into Saskatchewan is going to be dealing with some flooding this weekend. The rest of the country isn't looking too bad, but you can definitely see, even though that flooding is occurring, that part of the province is still in a very high to high fire danger. And that's because a lot of the flooding is relegated to creeks and rivers over land flooding. The forested areas and the surface areas are not seeing much. I don't know, I'm having a bad internet day. Let's go to Environment Canada live weather alerts. So it doesn't look like there's anything other than down here, continuing to see special weather statement, rain on tap for the weekend up to 25 millimeters for that part of Quebec. So that little southwest part of Quebec. But that's kind of all we're seeing right now for special weather statements. Taking a look at our fire start map. BC's, yeah, they've had a few more. This one here, May the 7th, so just yesterday, full response, 20 hectares out of control. Got this one, I think this is the one near kind of Prince George. It's at a full response as of May 7th, 8.5 hectares. And then this one down in Kamloops, just a small one, hasn't really escalated too much. So even though, we're still seeing, the fire risk is somewhat high to extreme in some areas, we're doing pretty good in terms of not having, any major disruptions. But that's highly likely because we're only at a, moderate to high fire danger in the prairies, which is good. And in those forested areas, that's the main concern, right? Because that's where you're going to see a lot of those, surface level fuels at the forest floor. Whereas right now in the really red spots, those are mostly grassland areas outside of the forest protection area. So we'll flip over to fire weather index. A little bit of a shift from yesterday. Let's take a quick look. So it has lightened up. The fire weather index has improved over the last 24 hours. So you can see that was yesterday and this is today. So some good news on the prairies. Good morning, Java. Thanks for joining us again. Fire weather index has improved in the prairies, but it's still gaining some ground in eastern Canada. So if you take a look in that southern, thanks for all the support and the likes, appreciate it. We've got, these areas here down in the southern Ontario, southern Quebec that is starting to dry up after all of that rain that they received just a couple weeks ago. So compared to the really bad years like 2023, where were we in 2023 on this day? That's where we were. So doing significantly better than where we were for most of the country just 3 years ago in that really bad season. So if you can kind of hold that mental picture in your head, you can see there Saskatchewan, really high fire danger, but fire weather index was low to medium, and the fire danger for Canada at that time, we'll run it here. Look at that map in 2023 compared to, today in 2026. So Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario doing a lot better. But I think that's just a result of that prolonged precipitation and snow that we had this year. And that just means as we get into June, we're going to ease a little bit more into the fire season. So again, if you're missing the briefing, where did it go? What logged me out here? There we go. You can get this full report at app.hazards with all of our sourcing information and key contacts if you need that. And if you have any feedback, please let us know, because we're always looking to reiterate and refresh what we're doing in terms of that reporting. So yeah, going into the weekend, we're going to see warmer temperatures definitely coming into Sunday. It's forecasted into cooler temperatures overnight are still holding, but really the forecast for the daytime is significant temperature increases across the prairies. And that's just going to bring, you can actually see here, if you look down into southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan, by Wednesday, we're getting into the high 20s, right? Northern Manitoba, those higher risk wildfire areas are going to stay in those cooler temperatures as per the forecast. So how's Alberta looking for fire season this year? Alberta it's not looking great in terms of, risk, because it's I think it's holding to, we're easing into the fire season this year rather than kind of like just being thrown into it. But I'm gonna say, like, if we look at last year, where we kind of ended the season, maybe like not ended the season, but let's just say July. So this was, July last year. Um, let's look at what August looked like, kind of mid-August, right? We kind of get into like June. Let's try mid-June last year. See, I think we're gonna kind of end up like this for Alberta. This was June 11th, 2025. Like we could see us looking like that again in a month. And I'm only saying that because again the drought levels are getting worse. Um, I don't think there's been not enough significant precipitation. Yeah, May long weekend is usually really bad. If we look at the May long weekend last year, like on the Saturday, right? And if even if we look at like what it looked like in 2023, which was a really bad year, northern Alberta was in really high risk, right? So I don't think it'll be this bad this long weekend. I think this could end up being like maybe like end of May into June with the way things are trending. However, I'm only going to caveat that with if the forecasts kind of hold out and southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan starts touching into those mid to late high 20s, right? You can see where it's going to get really warmer on Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, into Eston, even a little bit up to Lloydminster. And our premier doesn't seem to invest in making sure our forests are cleared. No, they're not. They're not doing enough for sure, right? They're not doing enough forest management practices. They've got fire smart programs, but it needs to really, yeah, it's not her top priority either. Absolutely. I don't know. I think there's this old conservative mentality still about let it burn and we'll be fine in a few years, but environmentally, that is not good for anybody, especially for our health mentally and physically. So this is where we're at today. Um, heading into May long weekend, it could, because if we're look at like northern Alberta, if you look at like Grand Prairie, by Wednesday, they're going to be, still sitting at about 15, 17 degrees, like not too hot. So I think it'll hold in the north, but the south fire danger is going to significantly take off, and Manitoba is going to take off as well. And that's despite the flooding that's going on kind of in and around Fort Mac, Janvier. Yeah, Jasper pretty much almost did, for sure. They're in a very unique situation. If you go to our YouTube, our Hazardscape YouTube or Spotify, you can listen, if you haven't listened to the podcast on why Jasper burned down and was so bad. There was a lot of unique situations that the government couldn't forecast or plan for because their fire modeling behavior was not ready. It did not hold a prediction of what happened in Jasper. There is just nobody and no data or evidence in the past to suggest that could happen. So they kind of weren't able to predict the situation in Jasper, and that's why it got away on them. And yeah, so that flooding in Alberta, it's going to increase through the weekend into next week. You can see here on the 12th, it still isn't even quite leveling off. What is that? That's by Tuesday. So in the next couple days, we'll see if that levels off, but that is still, 15 cubic meters above extreme. So that's a lot of water that's inundating those areas, and they are evacuated right now in some of those nations, which if if you did miss these briefings or the start of the briefings, we do record them. They're on our YouTube and our homepage, and you can go to app.hazardscape and get a free copy of our daily situation report and download a Word copy if you need. And this is where I'll mention we're able to do all of this work that goes into creating these live reports and this email list. Thanks for the hearts, Java. Really appreciate it. We're able to do this for the Indigenous communities and keep these services going because of some sponsorships we've been able to secure. One through All About Abatement. They're First Nations owned hazardous material company. They specialize in asbestos abatement, lead abatement, mold abatement. Kyle, the owner, is First Nations. We're kind of slowly teaching him on emergency management and his role in making communities safer. And so he's dedicated to wanting to support public education and training for Indigenous communities in community safety and emergency management. So they're helping us to kind of continue this work. And so we really appreciate them. And then with Kyle Darcy at Premier Fire and Flood, who does a lot of on-reserve work as well, remediating schools after floods, banned offices. They're sponsoring us too to help bring training and planning and public education to communities as part of their reconciliation strategy. And Premier's actually invested in a rapid response trailer for remote communities that they can deploy within a day or two to go and help remediate floods, fire, contamination in homes, wildfire contamination. And if you watch the YouTube video I did on their warehouse, they've also developed a method for preserving cultural traditional items like drums, pelts, leather goods, regalia, beadwork. So if any of that gets flooded or contaminated by fire, they have an immediate process that stops the destruction of those soft goods, and they can continue to restore and clean them. So we're super excited to have them sponsoring us in this capacity, and we're using their expertise and their resources to educate those we work with on how they can ensure that people are better prepared and have safer homes, safer communities from an environmental standpoint and a health standpoint. So you're going to see a lot more from them. And if anyone has any questions about abatement and disaster restoration, let us know. We'll get you in contact with them, and you've got access to expertise. And I think that's going to be a game changer as we go forward into, kind of helping to prepare Métis, Inuit, and First Nation communities. So thank you for your support, Java. Thank you for everyone who's watching. We really appreciate it. We're getting lots of good feedback. So gentleman from Nunavut reached out and he is asking us about evacuation standards and joint emergency management community planning. And so we're developing some materials on that. And then actually just today we sent off a program proposal for a youth emergency management program, which I think is going to be a game changer for child and family service organizations and other, on reserve organizations that support youth. And what this program is going to look at is within their capacity as, guardians, whether it be a fire guardian, land guardian, or water guardian. They're going to get structured emergency management training, incident command system training, planning, mentorship, coordination, and leadership support through us. And I think if we can pull this off and run a successful program, it's going to be a really great thing for Indigenous youth across Canada to get involved in search and rescue, swift water rescue, fire services, community safety, civil preparedness, helping elders and others in their community, make sure that they've got a fire extinguisher at home that works, a CO2 um, detector, and a smoke alarm that works, and educating other youth and young moms and young dads on how to make their homes safe for their babies and their kids. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes over the summer, and hoping we can replicate it for others. Because again, through the sponsorship with All About Abatement and Premier Fire and Flood, we're able to bring 10 youth together, put them through a complete training program where they get the same level of training that a director of emergency management would in Edmonton, and the same planning and assessment support that they would get from, going to like a diploma level program. And we're able to train 10 youth for a year for $30,000. And I think that's going to be a mix of in-community and remote support. And the community still gets a fully fledged emergency management program that meets the Canadian level standards. I'm fairly certain that if a community went to a typical emergency management organization and they asked for the 4.5-day basic EM course with ICS 100 and 200 and the design and development of a full EM program with a plan, they'd be looking at about $60,000 to $80,000. And they wouldn't have 10 youth trained in the community. They wouldn't own and have all of the training materials for those youth who want to start to facilitate it for themselves. So we're disrupting kind of the typical emergency management consulting framework, and we're only doing this for Indigenous communities. We're not taking this into municipalities. We are doing this strictly for First Nation, Métis, Inuit. So yeah, thanks for all the likes. That helps us with our sponsorships. The more attention we get, the more help we get, because we don't take government grants and we don't get government contracts. And that allows us to advocate for First Nations and keep things going. So really appreciate all of your support. Unfortunately, Canada still has not updated the drought map either. Like, we're kind of still looking at like the drought map for March, and I don't know why they haven't updated like a week into May. But I think, we're going to see this kind of, really engulf the prairies when the new mapping comes out. But, based on, what we're pulling up with the fire data, like we could even look at like the fine fuel moisture code, and that gives us a bit of an indication, right? So this is the moisture content of the very fine dead surface fuels that carry flame in a conifer forest. So higher values obviously mean drier conditions. And right now, kind of taking a look even to the Northwest Territories, like it's still kind of like winter, supposed to be winter up there. It's only May. Northwest Territories is probably, I don't know, I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I would say, like, given where they are located in the north and how dry they are, like that's, even though like you see Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC is higher risk, like this one's from May. Yeah, the one before was from March, but this is today. Like it should not be like that in Northwest Territories right now. Like if you look at Nunavut, northern Quebec, like for whatever, I've got to do some like more geographical work around the Northwest Territories and what makes that, maybe it's because of the meridian they're on. I don't know, but it's just really fascinating to see north of 60, an area like that this dry. especially on May 8th. Like as dry, almost as dry it is like 8 hours south. So very, very interesting. I think this drought code, let's see what it looks like. It probably pulls off the map, but we'll see. Okay, so this drought code is obviously not pulling from this one. I think it actually does, because you can kind of see this one probably reports lower values than the one published here by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. This one is more in the context of wildfire. So yeah, the drought in the Northwest Territories is just radical. Glitching. Oh, my live is glitching, or Canada's glitching. I know my internet is not working very good today for some reason, and I don't have my VPN turned on. But yeah, this will be recorded. Hopefully it records fairly well. And if you missed this briefing, again, you can go to app.com and you can get the full write-up, and you can head over to our YouTube channel right on here. You can find a YouTube link and you can watch the recordings of these. And then if you need all of the links that everything we reference, you can find that on our app as well. But yeah, pretty dry. So we'll kind of be monitoring things for the weekend and see how things go. I didn't want to do that. But if anyone has any questions, or you have any curiosities, or want us to include more of something, please, send us your feedback. We always appreciate hearing from you. It just helps continue to kind of make what we do a little bit better. And going into the weekend, yeah, stay vigilant. It's going to get drier. Just double check anything else that came off our radar. We were tracking Red Dress Day. There was a lot of good walks and events going on there. Again, River First Nations in Ontario lifted their drinking water April 13th. New long-term advisories were added for Long Plain First Nation, Eric Lake Public Water System. As of April 23rd, 28 short-term drinking water advisories in place for First Nations south of 60, excluding BC. Actually, you know what? If I don't know if you follow Treaty 6 Bird, Melanie. She did a really good TikTok post on water basin data for Alberta, and she showed a dashboard that shows what percentage of water goes to like oil industry management, irrigation, and just her talking about and presenting the water as like that living entity, like our relative. And it's a really good post, and if you go to her profile and take a look at it, she gives a really good breakdown of that water monitoring. So I would recommend you to head over to her account and check that out, because it was really interesting. I'm going to try and find those dashboards for here as well, and add that kind of into our data set, because I don't know if all provinces are graphically able to kind of tie in the percentage of water that's used for oil extraction, industry, agriculture, things like that. Like it's really cool. So if you missed Melanie's Treaty 6 Birder post, you go check out her post, because she did a really great job of presenting that today. Let's see. I think that's pretty good for today. I'm gonna get this downloaded and get it posted, and wrap up the weekend, and hopefully everyone stays safe. And I'll be back on Monday, unless anything significant happens. I'll jump back on the live if something erupts, but otherwise, we'll be back Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, because I got to get to a meeting downtown Edmonton And with the LRT being built, it is not an enjoyable drive. So I want to get this downloaded and get it posted. So thank you, everyone, for your support today and for listening. And if you're watching the recording, please comment and share so others like you can find it.